So yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I see some familiar names in the room, so hello to you who I know, and a brand new hello to those who I don't recognize. I'm excited you're all here. Welcome to the Ready, Set, Respond Mastering the First Aid Drill Planning Process. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm grateful to be joining you from my home office in Kelowna that's located on the traditional unceded territories of the Syilx Okanagan people, including the West Bank First Nations and the Okanagan Indian Band, where I have the honor to live, work, and play. We would also like to acknowledge that the GoToHR office, being located in Vancouver, is on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including Wamasiwam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and that our work across BC takes place on the traditional unceded territories of 203 distinct nations. So we pay respect to these nations and are grateful to live, work, travel, and play on these lands and waters of BC's Indigenous people. Many of you are most likely familiar with who I am. My name is Lonnie Burnett, and I'm one of the 2 health and safety specialists with GoToHR. I come from a background of outdoor adventure and recreation and health and safety, so I'm happy to be able to spend this time with you today understanding this recent implemented legislation and help you translate what the requirements are in the regulation to what you need to do in your operations today. So just a reminder of who we are, GoToHR is both the health and safety and HR associations that support the tourism and hospitality industry with training, HR, health and safety, research and strategy in order to drive strong workforces and safe workplaces that deliver world-class tourism and hospitality experiences in BC. So if you're not already familiar with us, I encourage you to explore gotohr.ca, where you'll find a variety of different resources and support available to make your lives easier, or just get in touch and we'll discuss our offerings with you. So most of our services and online resources are free for you to download and customize, and a lot of our training offerings as well. So be sure to check out those online and let us know if you have any questions, because we're always here to help you be better in your workplaces. The flow of our presentation today is as follows. So we are going to talk about the drill requirements and objectives. It's important for you to understand why we do drills and what is required before we move on to the planning stage and executing it. For the sake of our presentation, we've divided it into 3 sections, so pre, during, and post-drill to help us move throughout the presentation, and we'll focus heavily on developing specifics as well as the debrief section. Not to say that the other sections are less important or anything, they just take less time to talk about. It's worth noting also that this presentation is strictly dealing with workplace first aid drills. So depending on your organization, you may have guest first aid drills occurring on a regular basis. For example, ski hills in BC, they probably already do some guest first aid drills. Whereas this is a workplace concern and a workplace requirement with WorkSafe BC. So the injuries and that type of thing will all be worker specific. As we always do at the end of our presentation, we'll go through some of the resources that are available for you, as well as some support that's available if you need that. I will also say too that some workplace first aid instances can be strenuous on our stress systems as first aid attendants and workplace representatives. So we're talking about some workplace first aid incidents, both minor and major today. So please be aware of the potential for being unintentionally triggered from one of the scenarios we talk about. So we've tried to keep at least somewhat light. But we would like to offer a moment for you to prepare yourselves or sign off if you really need to from that psych health and safety perspective. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about today is the regulatory requirement that was implemented with the rest of the updated first aid protocols in November of last year. So additionally, there has been some specific objectives called out in the regulation itself that we will also cover. So before we get into the content of that, I'm curious to know how confident you are currently in your current ability to respond to a first aid emergency. So your team's current ability. So find that chat button. Answer between 1 and 10, 1 being least confident or comfortable as you are, and then depending on your program, it will fluctuate how much you rolled out the new regulations in the last 6 months, multiple other factors. So don't feel bad if you're for wherever you are on the scale. I'm hoping through my presentation today, we'll be able to increase that number by setting you off on the right track to tackle these things. So give me a number between 1 and 10. How comfortable are you with your team's ability to do your first aid drills and provide that support? Okay, we got some higher numbers. That's good. 7.5, 8, 9. That's great. Depends on severity. Yep, that's true. 8, 7, 6, 8, or 7. You know, I did one of these one time and I asked this question. Everyone felt super comfortable and confident at the beginning of my presentation. And then as I presented, they were like, oh, I actually don't know a lot. I don't know what I don't know. And now I'm more nervous about it. So hopefully we are able to increase those numbers or keep those strong as well. Okay, let's get into the regulatory requirement. So WorkSafe BC includes in their most recent regulatory update a requirement for the first aid drill to be done. It was a best practice previously to have first aid drills, but now it's written into regulation, especially for those operations who are responsible for guest first aid, like I said, like a ski hill. Now it's written into the requirement as OHS Regulation Part 317. So it states that the first aid drills need to be completed at least once annually or whenever the procedure changes and should be used to ensure that the procedures are effective and that everyone involved are capable of fulfilling their roles and responsibilities. So for example, there are a lot of you in the room that have seasonal operations. So if your staff teams or procedures change from winter to summer, you should consider doing more drills more frequently, so maybe one in the summer, one in the winter. Use of transportation equipment such as a snowmobile or a gondola in the winter and a side-by-side or vehicle in the summer to move patients from less accessible areas to more accessible areas to hand off to the paramedical team. That change in procedure would indicate that you should do another drill. So keep that in mind, and I will continue to say these drills should be worker focused, so ensure that the consideration is taken when you're deciding on the frequency of your drills and testing procedures and people's capabilities for their first aid roles and responsibilities. So if your staff teams change more than once a year, you have summer first aid attendants and winter first aid attendants, then yes, obviously you should do more than one drill a year. There's also some further guidance that WorkSafe BC provides for us in Guideline 317. So be reminded, though, that these are simply guidelines to help you better understand how to execute the OHS regulation. So you don't have to follow the guideline to a T. However, the guidelines will most definitely give you a roadmap on how to best meet the regulatory requirement. So in Guideline 317, it gives provisions on more objectives to test, which include the access to equipment and supplies, staff familiarity to procedures, and the effectiveness of your first aid response and the transportation, as well as guidance for documentation and reporting of the drills. So it has a lot of all that extra information when it comes to worker safety in the drills as well, which we'll tackle a little bit further on in our presentation. Okay, so now that we've talked about the regulatory requirement of annual first aid drills, including the testing, the effectiveness of the drills, as well as the personnel, I'm curious if you folks can come up with any other secondary objectives that you might want to focus on in workplace first aid drills. So please add the drill objectives that you come up with into the chat. Anything that you can think of for additional objectives. So I'll give you an easy one to start off with. Testing emergency communication systems. So for example, if not all your staff carry radios, how are they going to communicate with dispatch or for the first aid attendant when they need help? So what's the intended plan written in your procedures that you can test whether the communication channel is effective, whether it can be a hardwired phone in the hotel room or their cell phone that they carry around with them, a panic button that they have, a work alone device, those types of things. So let me know what you think are some of the additional drill objectives in the chat, please. I'll give you a moment to think about them. Oh, that's a good one. Getting the forms completed, so making sure that everyone knows how to complete a form and who to give it to. That's a great one. Ensuring workers actually know the contact first aid when they're injured. Yep. Finding procedural gaps, that's awesome, yep. Making sure everybody knows what to do. Effective evacuation of guests, yep. Just a reminder that we're doing first aid for workers, but yep, the guests will be probably impacted at some point. Comfortability levels, yep. Alternate first aid attendant info, yep. Equipment checks, awesome. That's all so great, you guys. Good job. I have a list here that that highlights some things that you guys didn't say. So thanks for everyone for sharing that. Some more objectives could include identifying challenges or deficiencies in the system or the process itself. Somebody said that. Evaluating the transport methods used for both on-site transportation and transportation to medical aid. So whether that's not necessarily an ambulance, but maybe a workplace vehicle that is getting used to take somebody to the clinic or something like that. Identifying barriers to having quick and effective response, having a general knowledge and readiness of industry-specific emergencies. For example, if you work in an environment that gets snow throughout the year, that is an industry-specific emergency where the potential for injury is caused by maybe falling snow off of the roof or slips, trips, and falls on the ice or wet snow in the parking lot, those types of things. So that being said, some of the specific objectives may change depending on your operation, as well as the season or on-site circumstances. So that drill list is not exhaustive by any means. You can add whatever objectives to the drills that you might want to test. So that's great. Good job. Okay, let's talk about reviewing your company profile when starting to develop your drill. It's essentially the first step in the drill planning process. And so we're going to take a look at 3 specific areas to focus on that we'll delve into when it comes to reviewing the company profile. It's important for you at this stage to have a wide understanding, a zoom out understanding of your operation, so that when you develop your drill, you can take into consideration some of those company specifics and make the drill worthwhile. So we're going to start with employees here. So with the drill objective of making sure procedures are effective and that all involved know their role, ensure you understand the different shifts that you have, the different season and fluctuating staff of those seasons as well. So for example, at a hotel, if you will have a greater number of workers on site during the day, but then in the evening and overnight workers, they will also need to know the procedure that they're supposed to follow as well. So the procedures may differ between those shift times. So ensuring the workers know what to do at the time of day is super key. Also seasonally, right? So for example, if you're working at a ski hill and you're using snowmobiles and toboggans to transport injured people in the winter, and your patrollers are trained on that, but in the summer, during your maintenance season, you don't use snowmobiles, obviously, and your first aid team shrinks down to maybe 1 or 2 people, or they do it off the side of their desk. Maybe it's a maintenance worker who's also a first aid attendant, right? You can't use snowmobiles and your first aid team is different. So you'll want to take the time to consider that when developing your drills as well. Maybe there's a summer drill and a winter drill that you do. And then lastly, what personnel is on site. So you may consider doing a drill during the day when the full managerial team is there and they can support. You can also have most of your first aid attendants on at the same time, probably, and then you'll be able to get a lot of them through the drill at the same time. Workers can also practice reporting or calling for help, but then also consider the managers if they're home for the rest of the day and what procedures change and how do you get a hold of them as well for extra support, you know, during the evenings or whatever. So yeah, take into consideration all of those types of things when you're talking about when you're going to schedule your drills and that kind of thing. Next, let's talk about site or location. So depending on the size of your site, you may want to consider difference between stationary and mobile workers that travel around the site and don't have like one specific work location. So what's the travel time from where first aid attendants are regularly working to any work location of those stationary or mobile workers? Are there supplies scattered throughout the site that could assist in a timely response? So these are some of the questions you want to ask yourself when you're starting to develop your drill. So for example, if we are at a campground and our site is quite spread out, we have more mobile workers around doing maintenance and cleaning and all that kind of thing. And we have one front desk attendant as well at the office, the check-in area. So usually we would use a golf cart to get around the property, right? Our maintenance worker is our trained first aid attendant, and they travel around on the golf cart, but they don't carry the first aid supplies with them all the time. So they'll have to go back to the office, get the first aid kit before going to wherever the first aid services are needed. So considering all those factors, start thinking about some potential aspects of your procedures that you would want to include in your drill. So that would be in our little scenario, maybe it's a mobile worker who gets injured and the first aid attendant has to go get the first aid kit. So their travel time is to being on scene is extended past the 10-minute requirement. Is there a way that the first aid attendant could go straight to the scene and someone else could bring the first aid kit from the office? So these are the types of things that I want you to start thinking about, that you can build into your drills and make the drills more realistic and custom for your operation. Some of these things are the things that we're going to challenges or barriers that we're going to build into our drills to test them and see how it actually works if something was to happen in real life. And lastly, we want to discuss previous incidents. So if you can look back at your incident data, you can see both serious and common incidents that happen, or even situations that haven't happened, so near misses or anticipated incidents. You can kind of build those into your drills. So if you continuously have slip, trips, and falls in the parking lot or something like that, that's very easy for us to build into a drill because it's one of those common things that happen, right? You want to take into consideration both minor and major incidents. So potentially we would want to start obviously with a bit of a minor incident and then move to more of a serious incident so we can kind of naturally progress in the complexity of our drills. And those are just some of the things that you would want to take into consideration when trying to decide what injury you're going to include in your first aid drill. If you are at a operation that doesn't have a lot of injuries, or if nothing comes to mind for previous experience within your own operation, you can also check out the sector injury insights for the wider sector by exploring the claims data that WorkSafe BC provides. So that's that link there. So in the slides, you'll be able to see it, but you can click on that. It's a bit of a database, and you can see what all hotels in BC or what all ski hills in BC are experiencing for worker injuries over the last 5 years. So you can kind of see what are the most common, what are the most that are causing the most claim costs, all of those types of things. You can kind of see what age groups they are, what job descriptions they are. All of those types of things are within that database. So if you don't have a lot of previous injury experience within your own operation, you can kind of see what's happening for other hotels or other ski hills or other campgrounds or other golf courses or whatever within BC. So you can kind of choose some of the injuries from that database. Okay, so now that we've explored some of the company profile aspects, we're going to move on into developing the drill specifics. So we want to be strategic when it comes to developing the drill specifics. So taking into consideration some of those company profile aspects and previous injuries that we just talked about. We don't want to forget about those things. So keep those in the back of your mind when we run through these 7 different topics, okay? We'll move through each one of these in more detail here in a sec, but I just wanted to help you understand the bigger picture. So like the little bit of a zoomed out aspect. So you'll see it progresses through identifying the date and time of where the drill takes place, the specific injury itself. Then you'll want to identify what your ideal initial reporting and response would be like, and then that ideal secondary response as well. So you'll want to identify who is all going to be involved in the drill, and last but not least, have that consultation with your health and safety committee and worker representatives. So that can happen at any time throughout the drill planning process. So don't think that it has to be last, but it shouldn't be overlooked. So I wanted to include it in this slide here. So date and time, taking into consideration regular scheduled operations and individuals on site and all that kind of stuff. So for example, if we're in a hotel, you probably don't want to plan a drill between 10 a.m. and noon, nor from 2 to 4 p.m. So if those are your busiest check-in and check-out times, you want to stay away from those times because people are already busy. If you're at a ski hill and your school groups are meant to arrive at 9 a.m., don't schedule a drill in rentals at 9:15 a.m. Make it work within your regular scheduled operation, and there's no need to make it harder on yourself when you have some of those operational pieces that can be avoided. Again, with the individuals on site, you'll want to ensure that you take into consideration the first aid attendants on site and maybe some emergency response team members or members from the maintenance team that would help you transport an injured person on a backboard, those types of things. Make sure that you have teams there in order to help with the drill. The requirement is a first aid drill, but you will most likely end up doing more than one. Um, so yeah, like the requirement is a single drill, but you will most likely end up doing more than one when it comes to different shifts and different procedures and different incidents, both minor and major. So that's another reason why it's important to develop your drill tactfully so that you don't have to do drill after drill to hit all the objectives and specifics because you missed one over here and oh, now we have to do another drill because that objective or that barrier wasn't tested or that challenge wasn't tested. Now comes a fun part, okay? We're going to identify, well, those, I should say fun part. For those safety people or the first aid people anyways, it's a bit of a fun part. We get to come up with the injury specific. Okay, so keep in mind that this is a workplace first aid requirement, therefore it needs to be a worker injury. Guest injuries would not satisfy the drill requirement, so you got to make sure that you're doing a worker injury. You want to identify who the person is that's getting injured, what their injury is, where they are on the property, when, what are they doing, how did it happen. Come up with a scenario that's realistic and tests some of those specific barriers or challenges that you might want to practice. So for example, if you have a snow school instructor who gets injured on the backside of the mountain where the radios don't work and there's no cell reception because of the topography of the mountain, that might be a really good opportunity to test radio relays during your response. Access to equipment is another good thing to test as well as any transportation that you have written into your procedures. So take those things into consideration when developing your injury specifics. Now that you have your injury scenario identified, it's important to review the desired initial reporting that you would like to see. Is the injured person calling for first aid themselves, or is it going to be like a secondary person or a secondary worker who is working alongside that injured person? Or is it during like work alone procedures when a check-in is missed and then someone goes and finds the worker who's actually injured so badly he can't get the radio and call for help himself? So what's that initial reporting include? What details should be reported about the injury, about the location that they are, who's involved, that kind of thing. How are they going to call for help? What communication are they going to use? Is it a radio? Is it a phone? Is it an alarm? All of those types of things can be identified in this section. If you have a policy where people aren't allowed to carry their cell phones with them, do they have a radio or is there a phone nearby that they can call with? So what is the desired timeline for the initial reporting as well as something that you can identify at this stage. It's also an important thing to ensure that everyone knows that it's just a drill. Okay, so for example, if you're doing a drill and you're using the radio and there's 10 other people that are monitoring or listening in, ensuring that it's announced over the radio that it is a drill will help reduce the stress, and the greater team may not be aware of the drill happening. And so making sure that during the reporting, I have this injured person, this is a drill, this is a drill, please make sure you understand that this is a drill. Say it like 8 times, I don't care, but like make sure that it's very, very clear that it's a drill so that no extra stress is actually put on anybody listening in or anybody within the drill. This is especially important if you're doing a serious or major incident, such as like a cardiac arrest or a fall from a height or a broken bone or that kind of thing. Now, similarly to the desired initial reporting, identifying what the desired initial response is important as well. So who is going to respond? What supplies are they going to take, with them? Ideally, how long it's going to take for them to get there. Keep in mind that the regulatory requirement for your first aid procedures is that the first aid attendant can be able to be there within 10 minutes, on scene within 10 minutes, okay? So another thing to keep in mind is the continuance or the suspension of those regular activities that are being done. So if your first aid attendant is the main cook in your kitchen or the front desk service agent, is there someone who can fill in for them while they're attending to the first aid need? So should regular operation be suspended when your team deals with the first aid situation, or can someone come and take over for them? So for example, at a ski hill, if all of your patrollers are helping transport the injured person, should you hold off loading the lift until some patrollers are alleviated from the scenario? Because if all patrollers are needed for one situation, you potentially may not have the ability or the resources to attend to another situation if someone else gets injured. So are you able to just pause and deal with this before you add potential for more injuries coming down the pipe and more things that need to be attended to? Now, this can apply whether it's a worker or guest injury, but it's something to keep in mind as managers, both during drills and then also during real life scenarios. Let's also chat about safety during emergency drills. So the safety of those involved in the scenario, the safety of those other staff members still on site, and then also the guests on site too. So you'll want to make sure that everyone knows that the safety should not be compromised during the drill. So if there's a serious safety concern, a tabletop drill or the use of a mannequin may be more appropriate, right? Like you don't want to put anybody in harm's way during a drill. Okay, so take a moment now to do the same for what your secondary response is going to look like. So what additional personnel, supplies, equipment, transportation may be required. So any additional reporting that may need to be done as well. So make sure that any managers who are not on site get notified, as well as like maybe WorkSafe BC or any other governing agencies like Technical Safety BC as well. If they need to be notified, they are. In a drill, you won't actually want to call WorkSafe for technical safety, but just having it as part of the drill will be great to ensure that it's going to happen in a real situation. So ensuring your staff are familiar with those reporting requirements is super important. So for example, if it's a lift incident at a ski hill, ensuring technical safety BC is aware right away. If the incident qualifies as a serious incident, making sure that the prevention division of WorkSafe BC is notified like straight away is also important. So identifying those additional things in the drill planning process will help us in the drill debrief process, or like understanding what objectives were met or what procedural things were met and what we need to increase or better have improved in our procedures. All right, now is when we get to make the guest list. Okay, so who is going to be participating? What roles are they going to play? Who's going to be the injured person, the first aid attendants? Who are the bystanders and observers taking notes? How are your joint health and safety committee members going to participate? In what role are they participating? What about supervisors or safety officers? Who's going to facilitate the debrief? All of those types of things. Identifying all those people will set your drill up for success, increase the participation within your drill itself, and then have individuals understand their part in the drill as well. And last thing that I wanted to say, but definitely not least, ensuring you incorporate that worker consultation either through your committee or through workers in general is really important. So some of you might actually even delegate the development of your drill to your safety committee as a task that they can tackle, and that's great. It generates worker involvement and buy-in, and then it takes some of the planning off of your plate as well. So that's a really good way to do it. But yeah, keeping in mind that there should be that worker consultation, that worker involvement is really key. Okay, so that's a lot of drill specifics. That's a pretty heavy section of content. So before we move on, let's take a nice deep breath and a second to digest all of that. Okay, so the next step in the planning process is to communicate the drill out to everybody involved. So I don't have a lot to say about the communicating the drill. There's about 5 things that I would say that need to be communicated out, but I'm curious to know what you guys think should be communicated out to the greater group for the drill. So set your scene. This is, you've developed your drill now and you're communicating it out to all the people involved. Find that chat box again, and what types of things do you think we should communicate out for the drill? I'll give you an easy one to start off. So telling them that the drill will take place what day and what time. So Wednesday morning at 9:30 or whatever you have it scheduled. What else do you think you should communicate to them? Let me know in the chat here. Why we're doing it, date, time, participants, the location of it, yeah, where it will be held, good one. The procedures, if there is a real emergency during the drill. That's a great one, Connor. Thank you for identifying that. Yep. Like what to do if an actual emergency happens while they're doing the drill, how to do a timeout or pause. Yep, that's a great one, Connor. I'll have to add that one to my list. Yeah, mock injuries, what to wear, what to bring. Yep. All of those are great things to communicate. You want to set them up for success, right? There's no need to make them fail. That's not what we're about here. So yeah, you'll want to communicate the support from management and the fact that it's a regulatory requirement. That's kind of that why that you were mentioning earlier. You'll want to ensure that everyone is clear on their roles and responsibilities for the drill. So having them know what to bring, what to have with them, all of that kind of thing, that sets them up for success in their roles and responsibilities. Identify who will be observing and taking notes. So not everyone's going to have a hands-on role in the drill, right? So some people will be time checkers. Oh, did they get there in 10 minutes? I'm going to actually start a watch in order to know whether or not my first aid attendant got there in 10 minutes. Identify who's going to be the first aid attendants or the safety officers, all of those types of things. At this time also, you'll want to address the greater team. That it's more than okay if they need to opt out or stop participating for those psychological health and safety reasons. So for example, if a worker has dealt with like a similar injury in their family, so especially when it comes to more serious injuries, then they may want to opt out of the drill, and that's more than okay. Remember that the drills are supposed to help prepare, not actually cause more danger or harm. And then lastly, just making sure that they're aware of the debrief that's going to take place after and that they'll be expected to participate in that. So don't just run away after the drill's done. We're going to actually come back and we're going to have a conversation about what went well and what we can improve on. Great, good job, you guys. Okay, so now that we've developed the drill and communicated it out, it's time to perform the drill, which is great. That's awesome. It's the big moment we've all been waiting for. I don't have a lot to say about performing the drill itself. Essentially, you'll just want to initiate the drill at the date and time that you have identified. So follow through on what you said you're going to do. Have those observers and bystanders take notes for the debrief, and then let the drill play out as much as you can without intervention. So if someone forgets to call 911 or forgets their first aid kit, let it happen. Then we can address it during the debrief. I'll put money on the fact that if they forget to call 911 during the drill, when they should have called, they will not forget next time, and that's for sure, hopefully anyways. I know I've maybe not in that exact sense, but I definitely have forgotten to do things in drills, and now that's ironed into my brain. There's no way I'm going to forget that next time. And then once the drill is done, demobilize the drill, including gathering personnel for the debrief, and bring back all of the equipment that you have deployed and resetting it so it's ready for the next call. Maybe it's a actual call that you get next, and then getting those who were asked to assist to stand down. So maybe sometimes it's like, oh, we might need a rope team, or we might need all these extra people to come help extricate this person. You can get them to stand down now that the drill is over. Again, that may be for more complex calls in the backcountry. But I guess one thing that I didn't call out on this slide, but it is included, I think, in the planning document that we'll share after, is to let it play without intervention unless there's, safety at risk or somebody actually gets injured during the drill or whatever. Then you want to pause and stop it, right? But if you're able to let it play out without intervention as much as you can. All right, so next we're going to talk about debriefing the drill. So if you missed the debrief, it's a missed opportunity to learn from everyone's different perspectives and get that further worker participation in the drill. So this is very, very key. And it's actually, debriefing is quite the skill. So I'm hoping to give you some good understanding of what you can do, a little bit of a guide with these 6 steps. So first you're going to want to set the tone for the discussion. Then you're going to review the scenario and the key objectives. And then together you're going to identify the positive things that happened and the areas for improvement. And then lastly, developing those corrective actions. So we're going to run through these one by one, starting with setting the tone. So setting the tone is really important as it will prime the conversation and give participants a place to start. So as soon as you can after the drill, you want to gather everybody involved and start off by framing the conversation as a constructive, non-judgmental session that's intended to identify improvements and encourage honest feedback. So very similar to an incident investigation, the drill debrief is not meant to identify who did what wrong or anything of the sort, but it's to identify ways to improve the process or the system itself. Okay, so you also want to take this time, especially during major injury drills, to explain the psychological support for workers who may have experienced triggers or stressful reactions during the drill. This is also a great opportunity to remind them that in a real situation, there is support for them from that psychological, that critical incident stress management side. In the drill is a really good, or in the drill and the debrief, these are really key opportunities for us to continue to destigmatize the need for support and reiterate the care that you as managers or as employer reps have for the workers itself. Okay, so for example, you may encourage them to come talk to you privately if they want more support, or connect with them or connect them to the EAP support, or the bounce back program is also available for anybody in BC. So yeah, it's just another great opportunity to integrate that aspect into our conversations as well. Next, we're going to want to review the scenario details and get everyone to introduce themselves and the role that they played in the scenario. So this is a great way to get people comfortable with talking in the group setting because they've already spoken. So it sounds like such a small aspect of the debrief, but if you're able to get them comfortable with sharing in this way, they're more likely to share when you actually have some content like debrief questions. So at the beginning of the debrief, you get them to say, my name was Lonnie, I was the injured person. Okay, so now because I've spoken already, subconscious, but now that I've spoken, I'm more likely to be comfortable to speak up later when we talk about objectives and what went well and what needs improvements. So don't overlook that little aspect, but if you get them to introduce themselves in their role within the drill, they're way more likely to give you some more feedback when you talk about the drill specifics. Okay, so you can then evaluate some of the key objectives of the drill. So asking if written procedures were effective within the drill, if everyone was able to perform their assigned duties, or whether they felt like they needed more support or more training to perform their duties. Was the first aid attendant on site within that 10-minute mark? That's an easy yes or no question. Where were there enough supplies and equipment available? That communication, transportation, were they effective and efficient? Talk about all those key objectives. Give them time to mull it over and respond. A little bit of silence during the drill is okay. It allows, you're holding space for them to put together something that they want to say and then saying it. So don't just run through the questions if no one answers right away. Give them some time to think about it. Next, you're going to want to identify what went well, right? What strengths in the program can be identified and celebrated. So feel free to identify those who performed well under pressure. Maybe it's the first aid attendant who took charge during the transportation and got the injured person transported quickly. Was there effective teamwork? Celebrate those things. Empower the people. Empowering people is really, really important. And one way to do that is to identify what they're doing well and giving them positive feedback and reinforcement for that. So that encouragement that they're doing something right is great. So it's kind of like one of those positivity sandwiches or something. You tell them what they did well, what they need to improve, and then again, you say thank you at the end. Positivity sandwich, or I think that's what my dad used to call it anyways. And then you'll want to take a moment to determine what improvements are needed. So what was challenging, right? Maybe it was the weather conditions that were challenging and they need more supplies when it comes to tarps or jackets and that kind of thing. Maybe it was the communication that people struggled with. So get people to share what they would do differently next time, or if the procedure didn't work how it's written, or does it need to be updated? Do people think that they need more training or another drill to practice their roles? You can reiterate in this section that it's not about placing blame or on people for what went wrong during the call, but in order to identify areas for improvement within the process itself. Always try and keep it about the process, about the procedures, the system in itself, and not like, oh, so and so didn't do what he was supposed to do. That's not what we're here for. There's always an underlying reason of why that didn't happen. And so is it the training? Is it it's actually not written in the procedure, but it needs to be? Is it, you know, another drill that we need to do so that it's more comfortable or people are more in tune with what they need to do? It's always about the process and not about the person. And then based on the improvements identified, you're able to then develop some of those corrective actions to make your own procedures, your written procedure, stronger. So use that hierarchy of controls if you can, and feel free to think outside the box to develop some of those corrective actions, okay? Lastly, you'll want to assign that responsibility and the timelines for completion to those improvements. If you change the procedure significantly, you may want to consider doing another drill to test or practice the new written procedure. So for example, if in our debrief we noted that it took 15 minutes for our first aid attendant to drop what they're doing, head back to the office to get the first aid kit, and then make their way over to the injury scene, what could we do to help speed up that response time? So could we get someone to meet them at the scene with the first aid kit? So the first aid kit does, or the first aid attendant doesn't have to do that massive detour? Or could we put maybe multiple first aid kits throughout the site so that there's one closer to the potential injury site, right? So determining what you're wanting to do and then assigning someone to execute it. So for example, in our previous example, if we've decided that we are going to scatter first aid kits around the site because our site is so big, who's in charge of buying the extra equipment, putting them together, and putting them out into the area and updating the binder of where the first aid kits are and that kind of thing? Who's in charge of doing that? And then what is the due date for having that done? Okay, so that's kind of the next stage of the debrief, is to develop those corrective actions. And then lastly, wrap up your conversation. So be sure to thank everybody for their time and their participation. Encourage them to have self-reflection beyond the debrief as well. If in 3 days they come up with a great insight, please come and talk to me, right? You want to be able to have that open door and get that information back from them so that the debrief doesn't stop, but it continues throughout the next couple of days as people mull over what happened. ensure them that the corrective actions will be taken, and that you'll follow up on that kind of stuff to get it done. And that's your debrief. That's it. That's all. Another thing to do then is to document what happened, because we all know if you don't document it, it didn't happen. So documenting the drill is probably the most simple part of the whole process, but complete the drill report, schedule any follow-ups on corrective actions, those types of things. I suggest putting those follow-ups in your calendar with reminders. At no fault to any of us, sometimes those corrective actions are forgot about because we have so many other things going on. So many other things on our plate. So if you're able to schedule those follow-ups, you're setting yourself up for success in the long run. And then finally, you'll also want to review the drill at your next Joint Health and Safety Committee meeting, or review it with your workers if your company's too small to not have a committee. And then also you'll want to review it with your management team, specifically those that have responsibilities within health and safety, or the departmental managers responsible for those involved in the drill itself. Okay, easy peasy. Simple as that. You guys got it. No, I'm just kidding around. We all know that it's a lot and could potentially be super complex depending on what your organization looks like. So we don't take it lightly, and we're here to help you for sure. So now at this stage, I have a question for you. So find that chat box again. I'm curious to know what part of the process that you're most looking forward to. So yes, this is a requirement that needs to happen, but are you looking forward to planning the drill? So looking at that the pre-drill stuff, developing the specifics, performing the drill, so trying to not interfere, but seeing how it all plays out safely, or post-drill, facilitating that debrief and documenting it. I'm curious. Performing the drill, we got one vote for performing, great. Performing again, nice. Post drill, got a debrief fan, couple debrief fans, that's great. Post drill, any corrective actions, good, good. Creating the drill and having everyone on board, that's great, yeah. I really like developing it, and then I'm kind of doing a cop-out answer, but developing it and then seeing all of it play out like what we've put together, so that's great. And then obviously debriefing it and seeing how people work together. Performing drill with new first aid workers and multi-department, bringing them all together. Yep, that's a great point. Like you could do drills with multiple departments, or like say you're in a hotel and you do a drill in the restaurant, and then you do a drill in housekeeping, or do you do a drill with one drill with everybody involved, right? Like there's different ways you can all put it together. So that's great. Awesome. Okay, so I've come up with a few drill ideas for you, depending on what your company is, and I won't read all of these out loud, but maybe I'll highlight one from each. So for accommodation, the second bullet point there has a scenario where a maintenance worker gets chemical in their eye during water testing at the pool. So that incorporates that WHMIS consideration complexity, right? So that's an interesting one. For food and beverage, there you have a bartender who's who pulled their back when switching kegs over in the back room. So that's going to be an interesting one because it's soft tissue injury where the worker may need to take time to rest, or you might have to figure out how to operate without them, throwing a little curveball at the team there. And then lastly, with ski hill examples, a snow school instructor tweaks their back lifting a child onto the chairlifter in a lesson. So that injury includes that chairlift aspect. So those involved are going to need to answer the question of whether or not reporting to Technical Safety BC is required. Okay, so you see how I've put into some of those extra considerations or challenges or um, um, barriers that they might have to, actually think about. It's not just like, oh, I cut my finger. Oh, I went and got a Band-Aid and I went back to work. Like that's not meeting the objectives, right? Testing the procedures. You want to give them a little bit more credit. They can do some of these hard things. These lists here are by no means exhaustive, so be creative, come up with some on your own. creating these types of examples is a great exercise for your safety committee to assist with. So they know the hazards that they face every day in their departments and in their workspaces. So use their minds to come up with some drill ideas. And then for those of you who have done a lot of drills in the past, whether they're first aid drills or fire drills, please add any other tips in the chat for others to see. But some of the ones that I can encourage you with today include starting simple. Okay, so maybe you work from a minor injury to a tabletop drill and then something more complex. Start simple. Don't just throw the most complex situation at your workers for their first drill. That's not going to set them up for success. Outsource the planning, so get help from your joint health and safety committee, your first aid attendants, other workers who might want want to get involved. Prepare your staff, so the drill shouldn't be a surprise. So make sure that everyone is ready for what they need to do. Choose those realistic scenarios as well. Don't get too carried away with a situation that won't actually happen. Ensure the proper equipment and supplies are ready and in good condition. The drill shouldn't pose any unnecessary risk for anyone involved, so make sure to keep it safe as possible. And don't forget to debrief. It's such a missed opportunity, and if you take the time to review and explore what you can make better. All right, so now we're going to talk about the resources and support. I'm going to run through this a little quick, just so that we have a little bit of time, probably 5 minutes or so for questions. So if you're starting to think of any questions, please get them into that Q&A aspect or the sidebar Q&A. That'd be great. So now that we've given you all of the information on planning drills, we're going to talk about how GoToHR can support you in executing your drills. We have developed this new first aid drill planning document template, and so it is now live on the website, which is great. It will also be included in your post-webinar email that you'll get with the recording, the slide deck, and these resources, so you'll have access to it right away. But yeah, feel free to watch back our webinar from October of last year. We talked about training and drills as well, and that's where this drill debrief, the one on the right-hand side here, came from. So it's for Lonnie's Hotel. It's an example that we did back in October. So we've come up with the drill planning document that you'll have access to, and then that drill debrief report form sample is there as well. Now, we have a variety of one-on-one supports to offer as well. So we have started offering first aid drill planning sessions, either in person or virtual, to help you walk through the process that we just talked about. So feel free to take advantage of that service. We also have our committee drop-in service as well. So we would come in, have time with your committee members to talk about drills, help develop one, or talk about corrective actions as well. So that post-drill review and deficiency correction is essentially us touching base after the drill takes place in order to explore how to address some of the deficiencies you identified in your drill. We also have first aid consultations where we would help you walk through the first aid assessment process, and help you develop what your procedure should include. We have that documentation review service as well. So, if you want to take a look at your procedures, if you want us to take a look at your procedures and get back to you with any potential improvements, we're happy to do that as well. And then lastly, I'd also like to mention that if you're looking to integrate mental health first aid into your existing workplace first aid programs, our PHS team can assist you in doing that, as well as because we experience so much more mental health injuries in the workplace, it'll be important for us to integrate that, start integrating that so that people can get support that they might need on the mental health side as well. So yeah, lots of support available for you guys. Please, please reach out and let us help you. And we'll help you as much as we can so that it's easier for you to implement. Now it's time for questions. I'm going to put safety@gotohr.ca email address in the chat. If you want to talk about any questions that you might have directly with us, that's totally cool. You can just email us there. I will also take this time to put in the link to our, oh, maybe, yes, here we go. Well, maybe I will. Survey link to our survey that we developed for our first aid procedure, or our first aid webinar series that we did in October, as well as this one is like our final send off for that. I will put it in the chat as well if I can figure out how to copy and paste this. But Alana, do you have any questions in the Q&A that we can try to answer now?
Yeah, thanks, Lonnie. That was great. I'll start at the first question that was asked. That's a good one. So if a property has a lot of minor first aid incidents that are treated, like MSIs, minor cuts, burns, bruises, would it make more sense to focus on non-common injuries so there's practice on those?
That's a really good question. I think you can do kind of whatever you want in that way. So if your first aid attendants are feeling really comfortable with the common injuries, yeah, maybe throw a different one at them and get them maybe a little bit more complex or more of a major one that they can test their skills. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, another good one.
Actually, pick like your two favorite ones because we only have 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, this one's a good one, I think.
Okay.
Okay. In situations where all employees work far away from each other, such as home office, are virtual drills accepted?
Yeah, so that you'll want to continue to like test and keep in mind the objectives. So the objectives are to test the procedures. If you're working from home and you have procedures of calling for virtual first aid or calling 911 in a serious situation, that's what you want to test, right? So if you have some of those things where you're scratching your head, you're like, how do we do this? Yeah, maybe a virtual or tabletop drill would work. It's all about if you can actually meet the objectives of the drill itself. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay. We have time for one more?
Sure.
Okay. There's two transportations, so I'll just ask one of them. I'm unclear when transportation is required. If an injured worker is stable, can we offer a taxi or allow a friend or family member to take them to medical care? Or does the responsibility fall on the employer? If unstable, an ambulance would be called.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely if it's unstable, an ambulance can be called for sure. The requirement, I believe, and Alana, maybe you can help me if I say something wrong here, and this is maybe one of those ones that we should follow up on. But the requirement is that the employer is responsible for transportation. However, that happens is up to you and the first aid attendant. So if the first aid attendant says no, they need to go in an ambulance, they need to go in an ambulance, period. There's no question about it. If they are stable, say they have like a sore wrist and they're going to get it checked out, yeah, they can go in a normal vehicle. They don't need an ambulance, obviously. And so the employer is responsible for either sending them with a family and friend that they're coming to pick them up, or transporting them in a company vehicle or something like that for sure. Yeah. All right. How many other questions did we not get to? Were there quite a few?
Oh, one was if the drill checklist and template will be available, which it
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
So that's fine. One was about the hierarchy of controls. So I don't
Okay.
know if you want to explain that quickly or share that separately.
Yeah, we can share it separately. Maybe we'll include something in the post webinar
Okay.
information for that. All right, great. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. I will swap the slides one more time. It's got a QR code on there. That's the webinar survey link. Please, please, please go and do the webinar survey link. It's about 10 questions. It'll take you 2 minutes. It just helps us to serve you guys better in the future and let us know what you really enjoyed. So train your staff on the procedures, develop that, and conduct your first aid drills. Those are your next steps. Request a GoToHR service if you need it. We're here to help with drill planning sessions, committee drop-ins, integrating that mental health first aid, anything that you guys need. So thank you for spending this hour with us. It was a pleasure. Follow up with any questions if your questions didn't get answered during the Q&A period. We're happy to answer anything in the inbox or in the contact form. So please reach out, and good luck in your drills, guys. I'm excited. Please let us know how it goes. I want to know how things are happening in the industry, and yeah, we're excited to be able to help you in that way. So thanks again for spending the hour with us, and we'll see you next time.